All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Natural Resource Committee. I'm Senator Bruce Bostelman from Brainerd, representing the 23rd Legislative District, and I serve as chair of the committee. The committee will take up the bills in order posted. This public hearing today is your opportunity to be a part of the legislative process and to express your position on the proposed legislation before us. If you are planning to testify today, please fill out one of the green testifier sheets that are on the table at the back of the room. Be sure to print clearly and to fill it out completely. When it is your turn to come forward to testify, give the testifier sheet to the page or to the committee clerk. If you do not wish to testify but would like to indicate your position on a bill, there are also white sign-in sheets back on the table. These sheets will be included as an exhibit in the official hearing record. When you come up to testify, please speak clearly and loudly into the microphone. Tell us your name and spell your first and last name to ensure we get an accurate record. We will begin each bill hearing today with the introducer's opening statement, followed by proponents of the bill, then opponents, and finally by anyone speaking in the neutral capacity. We will finish with a closing statement by the introducer if they wish to give one. We will be using the 5-minute light system for all testifiers. When you begin your testimony, the light on the table will be green. When the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute remaining, and the red light indicates you need to wrap up your final thought and stop. Questions from the committee may follow. Also, committee members may come and go during the hearing. This has nothing to do with the importance of the bills being heard. It is just part of the process, as senators may have bills to introduce in other committees. A few final items to facilitate today's hearing. If you have handouts or copies of your testimony, please bring up at least 10 copies and give them to the page. Please silence or turn off your cell phones. Verbal outbursts or applause are not permitted in the hearing room. Such behavior may be cause for you to be asked to leave the hearing. Finally, committee procedures for all committees states that written position letters to be included in the record must be submitted by 12 noon, the last business day before the scheduled hearing on that particular bill. The only acceptable method of submission is via the legislature's website at nebraskalegislature.gov. You may submit a written letter for the record or testify in person at the hearing. You cannot do both. Written position letters will be included in the official hearing record, but only those testifying in person before the committee will be included on the committee statement. I will now have the committee members with us today introduce themselves, starting on my far left. Senator Fredericks.
You switched it up today. I'm John Frederickson. I represent the 20th District, which is in central West Omaha.
Julie Slama, District 1, Otoe, Johnson, Nemaha, Pawnee, and Richardson counties.
Jana Hughes, District 24, Seward, York, Polk, and a little bit of Butler County.
And my far right.
Senator Tom Brandt, District 32, Fillmore Thayer, Jefferson, Saline, and southwestern Lancaster counties.
Hi there, Senator Mike Jacobson. I represent Lincoln, Hooker, Thomas, McPherson, Logan, and 3/4 of Perkins County in west central Nebraska.
John Kavanaugh, District 9, Midtown Omaha.
Mike Moser, District 22, Platte County, and most of Stanton County.
Senator Moser also serves as vice chair of the committee. Also assisting the committee today to my left is our legal counsel, Cindy Lamb, and to my far right is our committee clerk, Lori Volexson. Our pages for the committee today, this morning is John Bonas and Ethan Dunn. Thank you for both being here this morning. Appreciate that. And with that, we'll begin today's hearings with LB 397. Welcome, Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Senator Bostelman. I'm Steve Erdman. I represent District 47, and District 47 borders 3 states: Wyoming, Colorado, and South Dakota. Spell my name, Steverdman. I'm here today to present to you LB 397. For those of you that are new to the Natural Resources Committee, you've not heard this presentation before, but some of you have before. And so I'm calling this Preserve the Third. Okay, we're going to preserve the 3rd district. And I didn't come up with that name. Senator Wayne and I were visiting the other evening, and he said, maybe you need to do some things in your third district like we tried to do in Omaha. And I said, what would that be? And he said, the economic advantage from all the money they received was beneficial. So he said, you need to start preserving your third district. So here we go. So today I bring you a bill that the intent is to move Game and Parks location from their current location in Lincoln to the city of Sidney. And you have heard in the past, if you haven't, it's been said that you can't do this, it's unconstitutional. I don't find any place in the Constitution that it says where Game and Parks is to be located, but I do find in statute it says the Game and Parks Commission is authorized to enter into an agreement with the city of Lincoln, providing for the supplying by the city of the state of Nebraska for the commission headquarters, the office building related to the buildings and facilities therefore, including parking motor vehicles to be located at the real estate, which is in North Holdridge Street, east of 33rd Street in Lincoln. So what we're trying to do today is we're trying to change the location of the Game and Parks headquarters. And there are several reasons today to bring that to your attention, and my intention will be more clearly described as I go through what I'm trying to do. In my opinion, I think there are other agencies of the state that should be located outside of the city limits. And the reason I say that is because when you drive into Lincoln and you get to the city limits, if you roll your window down, you can smell taxes. And if you don't believe me, just try it sometime. So here's my point. I have another document here I'd like to pass out that proves that point. This document here is one that I took off the internet. Of course, everything on the internet is true, right? So anyway, I think I've given you all those. Can I have one of those back? I have one here. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. Anyway, I'm gonna draw your attention to a couple things in that document. And I highlighted on the back page under number 8, you will see that is the amount of salary and benefits that are attributed to Game and Parks. And so when you look at that total list and you look on the second page at the bottom, the total list of salaries and benefits for the state of Nebraska is $2,719 million. So in the city of Lincoln, most of the state agencies are located here. So they get an economic advantage over everyone else because of the tax dollars that come here. So if you just took into consideration Game and Parks, which is line number 8, and I highlighted that as line number 8, their annual wages, salaries, and benefits is $43,850,000. So let's make an assumption that one half of those people are in Lincoln. That's $22 million, if that's the case. And some will say that a dollar will turn over in the economy 7 times. If you do the math, that's $154 million. And even if I missed it by double, missed it by 50%, and it's only half of that, that's still $75 million. I can't imagine what difference it would make in Sidney, Nebraska to have $75 million of economic advantage. So it is important to us to understand what it is we could do by moving the department head of the agency to Sidney. Now, those are interesting figures. I think you'll find those interesting as you go through the whole list there. But it's kind of interesting that Game and Parks is number 8. Number 8. I didn't think they would be that high, but that's where they are. And so consequently, there's some other reasons why we should move Game and Parks. And one of them is the rent in Sidney would be significantly less than it would be in Lincoln. Now, these buildings are modern. If you've seen that flyer that I gave you, and the folks from Sidney have taken time out of their busy schedule to come, and they're going to testify next. But they're going to tell you about the facilities that are available, and that pamphlet kind of describes where they're at and the condition they're in. These are very modern facilities that were occupied by Cabela's, and then their predecessor came after them. So those facilities are available, and you'll find out more about that. So the financial advantage of moving into Sidney is one thing. The other advantage is we could free up the space where Game and Parks currently is, because in appropriations, we see information from agencies that want to move to some other location in Lincoln that there's no space available. And consequently, if we had Game and Parks move to Sidney, we'd have an opportunity to use that for other state agencies. So it would also benefit the state of Nebraska. We did a very similar thing 20 years ago almost now, when they moved the state fair from Lincoln to Grand Island. It freed up that space where the innovation campus is, and that would have never happened had we not moved the state fair. So I think there's some other advantages to moving Game and Parks to Sidney besides just the benefit to Sidney itself. So Game and Parks would be closer to the issues they have with the wildlife, because in my district, Senator Brewer and Senator Hughes's district, Dan Hughes's district, so it'd be Senator Ibaugh's district now, the wildlife is a big issue. And I think it's important that the Game and Parks headquarters be located in that area. And those facilities that they look after in the eastern part of the state are generally mostly recreational facilities, and it's not as urgent that they be close to those as they are in some of those areas. But I think that the issue is then we move Game and Parks there, and then who do we move next? And so that is my intention. My intention is to do this in a manner that benefits not only Sidney, but it also benefits the people that live in Lincoln. And you will hear Game and Parks, and it's kind of peculiar that Game and Parks comes in and testifies against bills, because all the other agencies I hear testify always come in neutral. And Game and Parks has taken the opinion that they should come in opposition, and they will. And they'll tell you that their people don't want to move to Sidney. And it's out where we haven't captured all the, whatever it is, we're wild and crazy out there, and you could be in trouble. We do have law enforcement, and we do have other facilities. We're close to a lot of other things, but they'll tell you that. So here's the issue. I don't care if those people move from Lincoln. There are people in Sidney, there are people in that area who'll take those jobs. And they'll say, well, we have a lot of people and you won't find those people. I want to tell you that Cabela's employed 2,200 people there at one time. 2,200. And I can guarantee you Game and Parks don't have 2,200 employees. So all of those issues they're going to bring up today, I've already heard those. I've heard those many times. And I was asked this morning, how are you going to move Game and Parks to Sidney? And I said, have you ever heard of U-Haul? That's not my job to see how to move them. My job is to figure out where to put them, what's best serves the state of Nebraska, and also my third district, which preserves our district. So that is the information I'd like to present to you today. You'll hear more information from those people who live in Sidney of the advantages to be there. And I thought it was kind of interesting. I got the fiscal note yesterday, and the last time I did this, the fiscal note was like 10 million. And so the fiscal office has changed their attitude. I think this one is 2 million. And so I'm gaining ground with those people as well. So I don't know what it's exactly going to cost. We'll find out. But the point is, we need to make that decision. And I'll just tell you this, we don't get this year, it ain't over. It's not over. All right. And we need to have a complete discussion about where the agency of the state are housed. And they will tell you, well, we got to be in Lincoln. We got to be in Lincoln. I'll tell you, ask them how many of their employees work from home for a year and a half when COVID was on. With the internet, they can work from anywhere. And this facility that we're talking about in Sidney is completely adaptable to any need they might need as far as internet or any of those other services. So I think it's a perfect fit. It's an opportunity for us to be innovative in the way we deliver governance in the state. And it's an opportunity for us to save some money as far as living in Sidney is far less expensive than living in Lincoln. So with that, I'll try to answer any questions you may have, and the hard questions I'll leave to the people from Sidney. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your opening. Questions from committee members? Mr. Moser.
So if your bill goes through, what would keep the Department of Game and Parks from having a satellite office in Sidney and calling it their headquarters and then still operating from Lincoln?
I don't know. Senator, I would assume that if we pass this and we ask their headquarters.
Because even if your bill passes, their heart's not going to be in this.
I don't know if it's our job to get their heart into it. If they're not, we change them and get somebody who is. That's our problem in government. We need to change our culture. We need to change our attitude how government delivers services. And if the people we have in that position don't want to do it in a way that is conducive to that, then we change the people. That's very simple. If they want to be in Sidney, don't be in Sidney. You stay in Lincoln, we'll find somebody else.
saying it's going to happen isn't necessarily providing the framework to ensure that it happens the way you'd like to see it happen. That's all I'm saying.
I understand.
Okay.
Senator Hughes?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Senator Erdman. So I'm new to all this. I am reading that the Game and Parks does not pay rent right now. Is that correct? The Fish and Gaming Federal covers the cost of that building?
You'll have to ask them.
Is that how we interpret? I think it reads that we don't pay rent now. So then I'm like, why would we pay rent of $1 million out there if that's the case? My second question is, Sidney is 6,000 people. It's like Seward. I think they should come to Seward, but that's me. How many people work at the Game and Parks, and how on earth, I guess I'll ask the Game and Parks this, but I don't understand how Sidney could absorb that many people right away. That would be a huge influx, I would imagine. So housing issues, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And then third, you say cost is less out there, clearly. So will we drop the employees' pay to reflect that?
Okay, let me try to go through those. First of all, on not paying rent now. If we move Game and Parks out of that facility, there are state agencies that are paying significant rent.
But
And we could move other locations into that property and save the rent we pay on the buildings that they currently rent that they're in Lincoln now.
But and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I feel like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is paying for it. They're not going to keep paying for it if the Game and Parks isn't in it. They're not going to pay rent for
I understand
HHS.
that. But what I'm saying is this, we currently pay rent for other facilities.
Right.
And we could move the people and the other agencies into that building, and the rent in that building would be far cheaper than what we're paying in some of these other
For
facilities.
sure.
Oh, you should see some of the rents we're paying.
Okay.
So, and the other question was, the pay is going to be less in Sidney? Was that what you said?
Yeah, because cost of living is less there. So you're saying we're going to save money, so then I'm assuming we're going to cut salaries when they move out there because cost of living's less. No?
Well, cost of living is less. correct.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. And so we may pay less for salaries. I don't know. I don't know whether we'll be able to do that or not, but I can tell you this. When Cabela's was there, they had high paying jobs. Those jobs that Cabela's had there, the 2,200 employees, they weren't $15 an hour jobs. So that community understands what paying people the necessary wage to keep them there is. And we had a significant number of people leave that community when Cabela's closed. And so what happens when private business closed, people lose their job. I've never heard of the government laying anybody off. Once you get a high job with the government, unless you really screw up, you're going to continue with the government. So when the economy turns down, do people in Lincoln lose their job that work for the government? No, they just raise taxes on people so they can keep doing what they have always done. So living in Sidney will be cheaper for them. It'll be less cost of living there. Whether it'll be less income, I don't know, but the net income could far be better than here. The taxes may be cheaper. Cost of living is cheaper. So all of those issues will have to be worked through, but I can't answer those specifically, but maybe the people from Sidney can speak about what the wages are there.
Sounds good.
Senator Frederickson.
Thank you, Chair Bostelman. Thank you, Senator Erdman, for bringing this bill and walking through this. So Senator Hughes' question actually kind of had me thinking as well a little bit in terms of if we were to relocate, have we considered would the state be paying for costs of relocation for employees that might be based in Lincoln to Sidney, so moving expenses for them?
That could be it. That was a decision to be made by Game and Parks, how they move those people.
Okay.
But the state could. It's going to cost some money. The fiscal note says 2.4 million. And you'll see that they pay almost 50 million in wages a year. So their budget is significant. And so I don't know, the 2.4 million is a big drag for them.
My other concern too was, I appreciate you bringing up the workforce issue and with Cabela's, it sounds like there's, to your point, it sounds like there's people are out there who may be seeking employment. My question is whether or not, it's one thing to have the people to fill jobs. It's another thing to have the skill sets that might be needed for the specific jobs there. And so can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that or?
So you're looking for, like housing and those kind of opportunities?
Well, I'm just thinking like if with the department, if there's sort of special qualifications that might be needed, whether or not, the actual skills are there for the.
I think that's a question for Director McCoy when he gets here. I know this at near the hospital in Sidney, west of the hospital, they've platted that property there. There's a big significant opportunity there to build houses there. So we've got the streets in and all of those things are already there. So there's an opportunity for people to, if they want to move there and build a home, there's plenty of room to do that. And so when those 2,200 people evacuated Sidney, and you'll be able to talk to those people from Sidney about that, that was a devastation to the city. And what better stable business or opportunity is you have a government agency in your town? Because as I said, I don't know if Sidney, a government agency ever laid anybody off. They just don't do it. And so when Sidney was vacant, when they vacated Sidney, some other businesses have come in that hire 20, 30, 40, 50 people. That's a very stable workforce. And when a business that hires 50 leave, it's not near like if 2,200 walk up and leave. So I think it's an opportunity for Sidney. I really do. I'm not doing this just because I don't like the way Game of Parks is managed. I mean, that's a fact. Everybody knows that. So does Director McCoy. But this is a logistical, logical situation where we move those people there. Not only does it help the state, but it makes sense. And it helps the third district. And I presented a bill in front of transportation a couple of weeks ago asking for $10 million for CDL training. And I said to Chair Geist, I said, this is only the second time in my life I've ever asked for money in a bill that I introduced. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to help our district. And we have been always in a position that we're kind of forgotten because we're so far from Lincoln. I think this is an opportunity also for us to bring government to us where we live.
Thank you.
Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Chairman Bostelman. Thank you for bringing this bill, Senator Erdman. In a sense, I have a reverse situation in my district. We had a YRTC in Geneva. The state is currently trying to sell it. We managed, we lost 76 really good state jobs. They put in 34 Medicaid expansion. These people are in a campus the state owns. And now the state is selling the campus. How insane is this? We own the facility. It's probably one of the few facilities we don't pay a third party like we do here in Lincoln. I'm not going to name names. I'd really like to see how much we pay a tremendous amount of rent in this city to third parties.
Correct.
So now the state has got RFPs out there, and they're only keeping 12 of these jobs in the city of Geneva. And to preserve the third, I'm with you on this, maybe not entirely on your bill, but part of this. So how you put that in perspective is when you take a town of 2,100 people and divide it by those 76 jobs, has twice the impact than if you take the city of Lincoln and you take out the University of Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's correct.
And I don't think people realize these state jobs are gold out there in farm country because they're good benefits, right. and quite often a spouse can do that. So I guess my first question is, I see two fiscal notes here. Was the second one compiled by Game and Parks? It's twice what the first one is.
Yeah.
Is that what that is? The first one's for like 2 million, the second one's for 4 million.
Yep, I think that is correct.
So that's their estimate of,
Yep.
okay,
Yeah, the second one is they asked Game and Parks whatever it costs.
all right. So
But I think it was 10 million last time.
okay, great. But I guess my question is, it's a very large agency. You know, my opinion might be different than yours. I think they do a decent job with what they've got, but it is a rural agency. It's like the Brand Commission. It's like things that happen in rural Nebraska. Is there, in your past discussions with them, is there a possibility we could get a regional, do they have regional offices where they have maybe 20 or 30 jobs, something of that nature, or a Western office or something? I mean, this, because of the issues that you've brought up in the past with wildlife depredation and some of these other things, I see a lot of need out there for this, but I don't know how many jobs. Do you know how many jobs they have in Western Nebraska now?
I don't know exact number in West Nebraska, but they do have locations all across the state. They have people stationed out there. It's not like they're void of not being there.
Are you talking just about the game wardens, or they actually have an office you can walk into?
Well, you'll have to ask Director McCoy about that.
Okay.
But the facilities that they have in the eastern part of the state are mostly recreational. I have never gotten a call from anybody from the eastern part of the state to have wildlife damage. It's always.
I can
in the
arrange
west. Huh?
I can arrange that.
You can raise
It looks different than yours, but yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So anyway, but no, that would be, my intent is to move the headquarters there. And whatever the economic advantage would be for Sidney or the rural part. You see, if they come to Sidney, if they come to certain, that will not only just be an advantage for Sidney, it'll be an advantage for the whole Panhandle. And so, we're talking about a region that has been so far removed from Lincoln and the understanding of the rest of the state that we're even out there. If you ask most people who live in Lincoln, the state ends at North Platte. And so it's an opportunity for us to have an advantage to have government there.
All right, thank you.
So do you feel that decentralized government is the way to go?
Decentralized, you mean?
Well, you say move everybody out of Lincoln, all the directors, agencies out of Lincoln. So DOT, we move DOT to O'Neill.
They'll still have a facility here, Senator Bostelman. They'll have to have some people here. They can't move everybody to Sidney. Just like they can't have everybody out in Lincoln now. They have people in the West.
No, my question is, do you feel that decentralized government is a benefit to us and does it cost us? So if we're going to move 10 people from Game and Parks to Sidney, we move 200 people from DOT to O'Neill. We move 50 people from HHS to Superior. We start decentralizing government. What I'm hearing you say is you feel that's better for the state to do that than have them centralized where they can work together and be, I would say, more efficient. So if that's the case, why don't we do that for our county seats? So a county seat, take the clerk's office and put it in one town, put the sheriff's office in another town, take and put, the driver's license division in another town, the treasurer in another town, because then that would decentralize that. Don't we have our county seats and our state government more centralized for more efficiencies? And I guess that's my question. That's my concern. If we decentralize, we're going to be less efficient and we're going to cost more money. I just wonder what your thought is.
So in your example there are you insinuating we merge counties? Is that what you're saying?
Say it again.
Yeah, are you saying we merge the counties?
So if you took a county seat, wherever it is, and pick a county, and instead of having a county seat located in one town, you take that county seat and you take the clerk's office and you move it to another town in that county. You take the treasurer's office, move it to a different town in that county. You take the sheriff's office, say, or the judges, move that to a different town, judiciary portion, a different town. Would that kind of have the same effect where we're decentralizing government and moving those offices out in those other communities to provide them a financial incentive or gain, economic gain?
I have several counties, Senator Bosman, I only have one town.
Okay.
So it'd be pretty difficult to move them to a different location in that county.
But aren't we doing the same thing with Game and Parks?
No, I don't think we are.
Because we have people come to the office of Game and Parks to meet with different people. And I guess I'm trying to understand. The point is that people come to Lincoln, to Game and Parks for certain reasons, permits, meetings, whatever it is. Same thing that they would go to a county seat for certain permits, whatever they have to pay,
Right.
those type of things. So if we disperse a county seat, it would be no different than any of our directors, any of our agencies in state government. If we disperse it, then people have to travel further to those areas. And does that create inefficiencies within what we do?
Well, I would say as far as getting permits and those kind of things from Game and Parks, I've never been to a facility to get those. I get those online.
That's true.
All my permits I've ever gotten, fishing or whatever, I just get those online. So I don't think they need to come to the facility in Lincoln to get a permit.
But
So I don't think the interaction with the general public for the agency's headquarters is significant. I think that agency headquarters could be anywhere. Most of the business that's done as far as permitting is done over the internet. So that could happen from anywhere.
True, but there are people that come to Lincoln, to the Game and Parks office to pick up information, to permits, whatever it might be. I mean, that does happen. Similar to the thing where you can do that in a county seat, same thing. You get the information
Yeah.
online.
And I would assume that those locations out in western Nebraska, like at some of those lakes, I go there to get a fishing, you can get fishing permits there. So there'll be facilities here where they can still walk in and get something. We're not gonna vacate this. I don't think they can send all their people to Sidney. They gotta have people here to manage Mahoney and all those other state recreational areas.
Sure.
So it's not the whole, and not every employee is gonna be in Sidney.
So kind of to the point of what Sir Moser was making, that moving it may only be a smaller number of people than the whole office. I think what Sir Moser was getting at, just because the bill may not cause everybody to move, it may only be a small portion of those.
But here's the other issue. The other issue, unless we get serious about doing this, we're never gonna find out that information. So we've got to figure out a way to understand what exactly this all does and how we do this. And that is for discussion. And I'm not coming here presenting it to you. I know all the answers on how to do this. What I'm saying is, this is what I'd like to see happen.
Sure, understand. Other questions? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman Bostelman. Thank you, Senator Erdman, for bringing this bill. You mentioned moving the state fair to Grand Island.
Correct.
Do you recall did the legislature pass a bill specifically to say move it from the grounds in Lincoln to the grounds in Grand Island? Or how did that come about?
They did, and they also an interim study on that, LR. And they took bids from other communities, and they got 4 bids. And once they got those bids, they tried to analyze which one would be the most advantageous to do. And Grand Island was selected as the one place to put it. And so it was a process over a couple of years to analyze how they do it, and what they do, and which city was going to step up and build the buildings they needed. And it came to fruition that Grand Island was the choice. And so it was a process that they made.
So it wasn't the legislature specifically just saying, we want it in Grand Island, so let's put it in Grand Island.
It was initiated in the Ag Committee. The Ag Committee is the one that moved the fair to Grand Island. And the issue came up that the university wanted the location where the state fair was. And so then it was an opportunity to try to either relocate the state fair here in Lincoln and improve it because it was ran down, or move it somewhere else. And so when they got all said and done, the best place was Grand Island. So that's the decision was made.
Okay. But I guess my point of my question is, they went through a process that was outside of the legislature just picking a spot and passing a bill. They did that kind of RFP process and had a couple of places put in bids and had a conversation about it. I generally kind of like your idea of decentralization to the extent that we can, but I have a great amount of discomfort with the idea of us just picking places. Because I look down this list of things and I think, oh, well, maybe the insurance commission should be in my district. I got a bunch of insurance companies there, bring in $8 million in salary, and I should bring a bill and move a department.
So they call it preserve the second.
Just the 9th district in the second, right? But I think that that becomes a dangerous process where then if we start doing that sort of thing, we're saying, well, I'd like to have this thing here. Let's pass a bill to move it. It becomes very, political and parochial and not necessarily in the best interest. Like maybe Sidney is the best spot for this.
Yeah.
But
Maybe we write it like saying city of the first class within 15 miles of the Colorado border.
There's only one.
Yeah.
I don't know how you write it, but
Yeah,
I'm saying
well,
yes, that maybe there's a more objective
Yeah.
metrics that we could measure other than, and we're going to hear about how I did this hearing last year. I remember Sidney sounds great, and I apologize for not making the visit in the last year, but
Well, it's still open. You can come.
thank you.
But let me speak to that a second, if you would. As I read the statute, it says in the statute where game and park should be located now. Somebody put that in the statute. I don't know how they did it. I didn't go back and research to see whether it was a process or whether they had a study done and said this is the best place. But it specifically says that game and park should be located north of Holdridge Street and east of 33rd Street. So at some point in time, somebody passed a statute and said it's going to be right here. So my thought was, if the statute once said this is where it needs to be, the statute can be amended to say this is where it should be. So that was my thought process. I sent this up to the Attorney General for an opinion a couple of weeks ago to ask if this is permissible, and I haven't received a response back. So, but I did ask, and so I hope to get that. But so I was basing it, and I'm not a lawyer, and you could probably explain it better than I can. But when I read that, it said it shall be specifically north of Holdridge Street and east of 33rd. I assumed that I could say it's going to be in Sidney. I'm changing the statute, and it's in the statute, it's not in the Constitution. So I thought it was permissible, so that's what I tried to do.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing that opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, stay for closing.
Thank you.
All right. Ask for anyone who'd like to testify as a proponent for LB 397, please step forward. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for your time. I am Brad Sherman, BRADSHERMAN, the City of Sidney's mayor. With recent events of the last 5 years, we have seen families moving from larger cities to smaller communities for good reason. I moved with my wife and 3 kids from Lincoln 16 years ago. In that time, our family has added 4 grandchildren, and all of us still live in Sidney. I mention this because some people assume that a small community isn't for them, and I promise after we're done talking, it will be for you. We also welcome anybody to come out and check us out. My phone number is 308-249-2321. Give me a call. We'll make sure your visit is very pleasurable. So while Sidney stands ready with much to offer in the way of available office space, housing, transportation, community infrastructure, and talented workforce, we understand the enormity of such an undertaking and the challenges it would present. That said, we would not be deterred by the challenges and are more capable to do what it takes to make a facility a success. With that, I'd like to let you know a little bit more about Sidney. When we mix a desirable business location with small town infrastructure that is both collaborative and recaptive, you get Sidney's community motto: small town values, big time opportunities. Because of our history, our successes, and Cabela's rise into global enterprise, and Sidney became a community of 6,000 to 7,000 people, providing infrastructure and services for nearly 16,000 people on a daily basis. Sidney maintains a hometown feel with a unique blend of a quiet rural lifestyle and inviting business atmosphere to make a great place for you to live, work, and play. Of specific interest to LB 397 would be the former Cabela's campus, just located off Interstate 80, consisting of 2 buildings, more than 450,000 square feet of office space, sitting on 35 acres of land, plus adjacent Cabela's corporate campuses are an additional 8 parcels of land totaling approximately 25 acres and are zoned commercial with utilities on site and ready for development. Because of the size and scope of Cabela's worldwide operations for more than 50 years, the telecommunications infrastructure there would surpass anything available to the rest of the state, including Lincoln and Omaha. In addition, Miss Bass Pro Shops recently spent under $720,000 in upgrades to electrical services on campus to provide even more redundancy for their servers, as well to provide electrical service for 2 independent substations. However, with the sale of Bass Pro, thousands of Sidney jobs were eliminated or moved to Springfield, Missouri. So aside from servers, 2 of the largest buildings are almost entirely vacant, and other remaining Bass Pro Cabela's offices and warehouses have been sold, bringing the number of new businesses with commercial space still available. But in short, a vast amount of top quality office space is still available from these 2 state-of-the-art facilities, and creates an incredible, unparalleled opportunity for Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, if not the state and other companies. Sidney also benefits from other significant demographics and logistics that are quite attractive. We're located just off Interstate 80. We reside next to Highway 385, which serves as a trade corridor from Mexico to Canada. We also access both Union Pacific and Burlington Northern railroads. Over the last 10 years, Sidney has seen $48 million in infrastructure improvements, $15 million in recreational developments, $14 million in housing developments, $175 million in business developments. But it is the work ethic and resiliency of the people that stand out. The population is well educated, extremely talented, hardworking, and dedicated. These residents have truly built a foundation and success in Sidney with qualified labor pool of more than 25,000 people located within a 70-mile radius of Sidney. Leading employers have a great opportunity to attract employees with relocation and expansion projects. We believe that we are more than capable of meeting the needs of an organization such as the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, as well as many others. That's all I have to say. I'm ready for all the questions you may have.
Okay, thank you for your testimony and traveling in today. Questions from committee members? Sir Mosher.
So is there enough housing available in Sydney to absorb somebody the size of Game and Parks?
Yeah, well, currently we have maybe 20 to 30 houses on the market. We have a development that is ready. It's already got the infrastructure, streets for about 120 lots that are just sitting there waiting to be developed.
Waiting to be built on, you mean?
Correct. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's developed. You're ready to put a house on there.
So you've somewhat recovered from the housing shortage when Cabela's was there?
Yes. There's been a lot of influx of people. Something that was mentioned before. A lot of people are working from home in Sidney, so we were able to keep people that way. There are people that have moved from big cities to work at home in a smaller city and still maintain their job.
So is Denver closer to you than Lincoln is?
Yes. Denver's about a 160-mile trip. And this was 343. Not that I was counting.
Maybe you should move Game and Parks from Colorado to Sydney.
I'm all for it. We could even get Wyoming in there. That's only 60 miles the other way.
Efficiencies of scale, you could have all three of them.
I think you bring up an excellent point. I'll be talking to some other senators in other states.
Thank you.
Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Chairman Bostelman. Thank you for the trip here today. What does a lot cost in Sydney?
I'm not 100% sure. I'd say around $10,000 to $15,000, but don't quote me on that.
Okay, I think that compares with about 70,000 here in Lincoln. So I mean, you have a
really
huge
enjoy that.
advantage there. When Cabela's was going, I guess the worst day of your life had to be the day that Cabela's announced that they were leaving. What was the population of the town then when Cabela's was going?
Just over, I think 6276, I think is what the figure that sticks out.
So you really haven't lost a lot of population with the transfer of those jobs, have you?
Correct. There was a population loss in those 2 years directly afterwards, and it slowly came back.
So last year I had the opportunity to go out there. First time I've ever been in Sydney. We were working on a project out at the National Guard Armory. Very impressed. And it does look like one of the two buildings that they had out there is filled. Is that correct? Cabela's?
No. So there are two buildings.
Yeah.
And both of them are entirely vacated, except for, I think there's less than 100 employees in the second building.
And those employees are?
Those are Cabela's employees.
So they do have a presence?
They do have a footprint.
Does Cabela's own both of those buildings?
Correct.
But they are of the mind to lease that space out, is that correct?
They're looking to sell the buildings. They want to sell the buildings altogether and have somebody else, whether somebody buys them and leases them out. But I don't believe they're interested in leasing the buildings.
But they would sell the buildings and still keep those jobs in town?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. What percent of your new residents are from the state of Colorado?
I would have to guess probably 10 to 20%.
Oh, really?
More.
I figured it would be higher than that. So given that infrastructure, which is magnificent, I mean, you're driving down I-80, it's like, whoa, check this out. You've probably had a lot of other opportunities look at Sidney. Would that be a correct statement?
Yes.
I mean, especially with your proximity to Denver.
Yeah, we have, I think the chamber and the county tourism department has done an excellent job of seeking out businesses to move into Sidney. We've had a good share of businesses taking over some of these buildings. And again, obviously with the loss of occupation to those buildings, it's been available. And it's a great opportunity for somebody to come to Sidney and start a business.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? The building that we're talking about, is it the buildings that are north of retail store? Well, was retail store?
But they're all in a
I mean, they're all
line
in
east to
that-
east to west. Yeah, they're just all basically straight north of the
Right,
interstate.
retail store set kind of, as I remember being there, the retail store set here, there's a pond or lake in front of it. And then on the north side, there's a line of buildings, office structures, not that, those are buildings we're talking about?
Yes, yep, they're all right there next to those buildings. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Sir Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairman Rossman. Thanks for being here. And I really do want to come visit Sidney. It does look beautiful. And I appreciate the handout you have here. I'm just looking at this map of the area. So we're talking a lot about the Cabela's facilities. Are there other options, or if we move Game Parks to Sidney, would that be the only office they could office?
No, there actually is a few other buildings in town that could house up to 130 employees if that's the population that the game parks would move out.
Okay. So it'd be like 3 options you're saying, or?
I would say there's at least one other option besides the 2 Cabela's buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next proponent for LB 397.
Morning.
Good morning, welcome.
Paul Stroman, Paulstromen. I'm one of the councilmen for the city. Work with Brad over here. I'm also a member of the a commissioner for the Oil and Gas Commission, which is also located in Sidney. We had the pleasure of meeting you last year when I came to testify. I actually grew up in New York. I grew up about a half an hour outside of Manhattan on Long Island. So I truly appreciate Sidney as a small town. The idea that people may think that Sidney has less to offer because it's, you know, in the middle of nowhere is a fallacy. It actually has quite a bit to offer. It's actually, as Brad brought up, and I think as you brought up, you know, we're in close proximity to a number of larger cities, Omaha, Denver, Wyoming, Cheyenne, Pierre, South Dakota, if you wanted to make that drive. I'm not sure why you would, but maybe you would. So I'm going to speak more on the social side of Sidney. Brad talked about the business side of it. I'll just go through this real quick, and then if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask away. Sidney exemplifies a high quality of life and maintains its small town values. The community is home to extraordinary people with an awe-inspiring sense of community pride. Many of the residents have had the chance to relocate, but chose to stay here in Sidney because all that Sidney has to offer, often reinventing themselves and their careers in order to do so. Sidney is a safe place to live, a great place to raise a family, home to top-notch schools, beautiful neighborhoods, and an award-winning healthcare facility. A new $17 million high school was completed in 2009. And in 2019, Sidney schools received the National Blue Ribbon Award given to the top 1% of schools. A new 25-bed critical care hospital was completed in 2015. Sidney Regional Medical Facility features over 20 outpatient services and features a modern top-level physical therapy department. Residents have access to the Dorward Cancer Center, where they can receive daily treatments, eliminating the need for long-distance travel. The Sidney Housing Authority increased their offerings with the recent construction of Canterbury Estates, providing affordable housing to residents with special needs. Other recreation events and activities include a new aquatic center. We have the Hillside Golf Course, which is an 18-hole championship level rated golf course nestled in Crested Buttes. We have Deer Run Disc Golf, if you like Frisbee. Cheyenne County Community Center offers a full range of fitness classes and activities, including an indoor walking track. Legion Park has a stocked fishing pond. horseshoe pits, volleyball court, tennis court, and baseball and softball fields. More than 7 miles of walking, running, and biking trails connecting the interstate exchange with Western Nebraska Community College, and easy access through town, extending all the way to the county fairgrounds on the western edge of town. Annual Oktoberfest celebration, because who doesn't like having a beer and a brat, right? Summer Downtown Sound concert series, registered historic downtown shopping district, more than 35 restaurants, lounges, and sports bars. We don't have 35 sports bars, but you know, they're combined together. Sidney offers abundant and affordable housing options with prices considerably lower than the U.S. average. The median home value in Sidney currently is $145,000 with a cost of living index of 78.2. The city of Sidney is currently executing a comprehensive housing needs assessment to identify, evaluate, and quantify the number of housing units, rental and for sale, currently available. Currently, there's more than 100 parcels of land platted and ready for housing development with new streets. Hard work, dedication, and love of our community keeps Sidney determined to continue to build on our reputation as pride of the Panhandle. You can be assured we are ready to meet the needs of the Game and Parks Commission and the other opportunities that come our way. So thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot.
Okay, thank you for your testimony, Sir Mosher.
So what brought you from New York to Sidney, Nebraska?
Convoluted, right? So I grew up in New York, ended up in Colorado. My wife was actually from Hershey, Nebraska. We met in Denver. And I became involved with a ethanol group, and we actually built the Madrid ethanol facility. And so we moved to North Platte, Nebraska when we did that. So the company I'm with owns the ethanol plant down in Madrid. My wife was a gas and oil attorney. The Gas and Oil Commission is in Sidney, and we ended up in 2013 in Sidney because it didn't make sense for her to continue to commute back and forth.
So you having withdrawal pains living in Nebraska?
No, not at all. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I mean, I can, if I need to be someplace, we're in close proximity to all the major airports. Sidney, being on I-80 makes it convenient. We have an airport that is actually rated for commercial jets. We don't have any landing there currently, but if we had to, we could. So Sidney's located in the perfect place for especially raising a family or just.
All right, well, thank you. Appreciate your testimony.
Sir Brandt.
Thank you, Chairman Bostelman. Thank you, Mr. Stroman, for making the trip today. I always enjoy learning about different parts of the state. Do you know what the median age of your housing is in the city?
I don't, but I can get that
Do
information.
you think it's above 1960 or below 1960?
I would say, above.
Above.
Okay.
So it's a fairly modern town.
Yeah.
Compared against most of the other towns. So on the chance that this did not happen today, what can we as a legislature do in other areas? Because you are uniquely centered to pull people in from Wyoming and Colorado. And we talk a lot of talk here about bringing people in from out of state, but you guys are actually doing it. What would you like to see us do to help you guys out to be more successful?
Wow, there's a lot. I think that, as we've stated, Sidney has a lot to offer logistically. We're centrally located. We have access to BNSF and UP, which means that we can reach pretty much the entire country from a freight perspective. We have a commercially rated airport. We're on I-80, which makes us accessible via pretty much all of the truck traffic.
But I guess my question is, you have your choice of Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska. What incentive can we as a state do to incent people and businesses to locate in Sidney versus Cheyenne or whatever the closest one in Julesburg, whatever one you're close to. I mean,
Well, I
because
think-
we keep getting told that people shop states by income tax and all this other stuff, which I do not believe. That's their sole reason for moving somewhere. So I guess what makes Nebraska more attractive than Colorado or Wyoming?
I would say cost of living, especially in Sidney. I mean, we've shown that housing prices, cost of living is much more beneficial out where we are in the state. I think that especially smaller families, I think there's a safety aspect to it as well. You can see. I think we can all see what's going on in larger cities and larger communities. People have a sense. People like to have a sense of community, right? They like to have a sense of safety. They like to know that the schools are good. They like to know that they have the ability to compete financially. And I think you have all of those offerings in Sidney, and you have all those offerings really in Western Nebraska.
All right, thank you.
What's the median price for housing that's on the market now, do you know?
Right around 145.
And you have the 100 lots. What are those expected to be built at?
Well, I would say pre-pandemic, you were looking at $100 a square feet. Post-pandemic housing costs, I think they were up as high as $300 a square foot. I would probably say they've come down to about $200 a square foot. And that's simply based on building materials and building costs. The infrastructure is there already, so you already have streets, gas, sewer, and electrical plumbed in. So it would just take someone to come out, contractors coming out and wanting to make that.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you for coming in today. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting us speak today. Appreciate it.
Other proponents for LB 397, please step forward. Any other proponents? Seeing none, anyone like to testify in opposition to LB 397? Please step forward.
Morning, Chairman Bostelman, members of the committee. My name is Timothy McCoy, TIMOTHY-MCCOY. I'm the director of the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, located at our headquarters office at 2200 North 33rd Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. As an agency, we have a mission that we're charged with by the legislature to serve as stewards of the state's fish, wildlife, and park resources for all citizens of this state. This move would require additional agency costs, and we believe reduce efficiency in our coordination that we do with the legislature, the governor, other state offices and agencies, the University of Nebraska, and the USGS Cooperative Fish Wildlife Research Unit at UNL. We work with those in a host of state agencies, including DAS, State Personnel, OCIO, Department of Transportation, Energy, and Departments of Energy and Environment, Department of Ag, Department of Natural Resources. We work with those entities on a myriad of issues, responses, research, and coordination to address challenges that come up regarding our natural resources, budgeting, accounting, procurement of goods and services, construction, design, and permitting, personnel, legal, coordination of environmental reviews for all state permits issued by other state agencies, and many others. We do believe moving the agency away will make some of that coordination more challenging, as well as increase costs for travel within for the agency to go meet with those other agencies that are located in Lincoln. This will have, the biggest concern I will tell personally I have as the leader of our agency is the potential personal costs and impacts to our employees. We have dedicated, professional, and passionate staff that are invested in our mission, and the potential impacts of relocating does raise concerns. Our staffs have home, families, and in most cases, working spouses with jobs in the Lincoln area. This will force hard decisions about some employees, whether they consider moving or looking for employment elsewhere. It also creates challenges moving away from their support network that they have of family and friends. And we're also concerned about recruitment of talented professional staff with a move such as this. In terms of our staffing, the majority of our staff do not work in our Lincoln office. When we look at our permanent employees that we have in the state, 33% or 155 of our permanent employees work from our headquarters. The other 311 or 67% work from locations across the state, including district offices, service centers, parks location, wildlife management areas, fish hatcheries, shooting ranges, and also our conservation officers who throughout the districts work from their homes. When we look at our seasonal employees, which we hire way more seasonal employees with the nature of our work, we hire a lot of folks in our parks locations to help do work on our wildlife management areas and fish hatcheries and field offices. We will hire in a typical year anywhere from about 800 to 1,300. Last year in July, when we were at our peak, we had 901 seasonal employees. 3% of those, or 25, work out of our Lincoln office. The remainder, 876, were working at those various locations around the state. So when you look at our peak activities, when we're fully staffed in those seasonal times, when you combine those, 13% of our employees are working from our headquarters office. When we look across the state, those break down. We have 254. And when we're at maximum in Northeast Nebraska, 224 employees in Northwest Nebraska, about 521 in Southeast Nebraska. Part of that is due to the prevalence of many of our park locations. And Southwest Nebraska, about 188. And then our headquarters, a total of about 180 with our permanent staff and those temporary employees. We are concerned the cost will be significant and additional. One of the things I would note that because of the timing of the bill, there's only in the fiscal note only accounts for half of a year's potential rent. There are some other costs that would obviously come in with that. I do want to provide a little information on our building. Our building is owned. It was built by the agency on the land provided by the city of Lincoln. And there's actually some of the land where we have parking was provided by the University of Nebraska. And those buildings are interconnected. We built one of those buildings for fisheries and wildlife work using Pittman, Robertson, Dingle Johnson funds that are wildlife and sport fish restoration dollars that come back to the state. If we vacate that building or allow it to be used for another use, we'll be required to pay that back. That was for building B of our agency. We have 2 buildings. And those buildings were built with interconnected heating, cooling, electrical, IT, and a walkway between them. So it would be difficult to separate those. Additional lease costs, estimate of $960,000 to $1.2 annually based on Nebraska DAS lease rates. And I'm out of time. I will stop. I'll be glad to answer questions. Sorry.
Thank you, Director. Are there questions? Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for coming in, Mr. McCoy. Go ahead. I would like to hear the rest about the building, and you got cut off kind of at the end.
Yeah, well, the building has been set up to meet our needs with a lot of features that include, fisheries and wildlife research labs with adequate venting that we can do laboratory work. We have a necropsy room for necropsying dead animals, which actually has to have a really good venting system because otherwise it smells really bad when it doesn't work. And then we also have freezers for wildlife investigations. We have locked freezers for things that are involved in law enforcement investigations. We have other freezers for animals that are accidentally killed, that are species that can't be kept. They're non-game species, or things like we get, people tell us there's an eagle somewhere and we pick those up. We eventually deliver those to Fish and Wildlife Service. We also have locked safe areas for weapons, locked safe areas for all of our funds, permit books, those things that we do. We have a mailroom loading dock and storage area where we provide all of our materials out to all of our vendors in the state and send them to the public. And then the secure agency record storage that we're required to have. We have a fair amount of temporary storage in our basement we use before we send things down to the state area. We estimate increased travel costs at about almost $200,000 a year with this when we look at a full year. One-time moving costs, we would expect for those specialty needs to need to pay for about up to $1 million for modifications in order to meet those specialized needs that we have that aren't in a typical office building. And then we have relocation costs for staff, which we would be required to pay, which we estimated at about $850,000. Giving some things I've heard about some of the relocation costs for moving agencies in Lincoln, we may be on the low end on that, but we also assumed that we would utilize some of our own staff to help with some of that loading. And then there are concerns about, moving, if local housing is not available, we would probably be required to pay for temporary lodging and storage if we're requiring people to move. And the other challenge is because those buildings are owned and that wildlife and sport fish, I know the fiscal note from the fiscal analyst indicated we would keep that as a district office. That means we will continue to have all those maintenance costs for those buildings on top of, paying a lease rate.
Thank you.
Other questions? Sir Mosier.
How many employees do you have in Lincoln?
In our headquarters office, we have at maximum about 180 employees. We have about 155 permanents, and then we will have some seasonal staff and interns that come in about 25 a year.
Looking at the information that Senator Erdman provided, I don't know if you saw that, but it indicated that your budget's been around 37, 38, 39 million. And then this last year, it went from 39 to 43 or something. Is there a reason that you had such a big bump in your budget?
Are you talking our total budget?
I don't know, it said,
okay.
it gave your, let me find it here.
It's salaries and benefits.
Oh, well, salaries and benefits probably bumped up last year because the year prior, we were really struggling hiring park temporaries. And last year we did some slight modifications to our pay ranges in there and working with state personnel. We were able to get closer to fully staffing our park seasonal workers.
Here's the information I was
All right.
asking questions about, but that's a sufficient answer. Thank you. I just wanted you to have, so you were not caught off guard when I'm asking you about something you don't have in your hand. Thank you.
So of those 155, because I think Sir Mosier mentioned earlier, how many do you feel actually would have to move? I mean, do you think all of them have to move, or is there half of them would move, a third of them would move?
Well, that's a hard estimate to make. I think we estimated as we were looking at our estimate and our fiscal note that we would probably have at least 80% of our staff that we would hope would move. When we look at if you left that location as active as a service center office still in Lincoln, you would still have probably a core team of people that work selling permits at the counters and manning the phones. There would probably be 4 or 5 people. We have some district staff that work out of our wildlife division on our wildlife management habitat partner section. They would definitely stay. And then we would have to look at all of our positions. Some of the challenges I am concerned about is we do a lot of, we are spread all over the state, but we do a lot of our administrative work, the heads of our law enforcement division, the heads of our fisheries divisions, heads of our wildlife division, the leaders are all there. We can pull together when there's an issue and move quickly. Also, all of our budget staff, our communication staff, and our other support staff is there that helps support divisions all across the state. But it allows us for very, very effective coordination. And we have people that are we have managers that do more than manage people. They're working managers. We have to be, we're a relatively small agency for the scope of the work that we do when you look around the country.
So how many, I think they're called district offices, do you have if you go across as we go across the state? Or
we have district offices in Lincoln. The Lincoln office also has our district office in the district office there. We have a district office in Norfolk. We have a district office in North Platte, and then a district office in Alliance. We have service centers at both Bassett, which at one time, probably 15 years ago, was a district office. And then at Kearney, we have a service center as at one point, till about 10 years ago, that was a district office. And then we also sell permits at most of our parks locations.
Okay, thank you.
across the state.
Other questions, Senator Brown?
Thank you, Chairman Bostelman. Thank you for testifying today. Would it be possible to get the committee a list of employees and where they're stationed around the state? Or if you said that the Norfolk Regional Office has 20 people working at it, so on and so forth. So
Yeah,
we could get a
I can
feel
work
for
to
that.
get that. I know that I have something that is not as detailed as where those offices are, but it's actually employees by county. Now in Lancaster County, we have other parks areas. So the Lancaster number itself is quite a bit higher than what is in our headquarters office.
Then
But
I
I'd be
would-
glad to share that.
Right, and then you brought up the necropsy lab. I would assume that's going to have to stay put just because of its proximity to the diagnostic center for UNL there on East Campus when you have to evaluate for contagious diseases, rabies and such.
Most of the time when we're using the necropsy lab, it's because we're doing a necropsy for more of the biological reasons. If we believe it's a disease issue, we work directly with the lab and take it straight to the vet center.
So when you say other reasons, probably poaching, or you're trying to determine what happened?
We do that with poaching. We do that sometimes with freshly killed animals to try and gain information, looking at what their body condition is. Sometimes you can figure out what they've been eating. In some cases, you're trying to really pin down what cause of death was, whether it was something nefarious or they got hit by a vehicle.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Other opponents of LB 397, please step forward.
Morning, Chairman Bostelman, members of the committee. My name is Scott Smathers, SCOTT, SMATHERS. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Sportsman Foundation. Excuse me. I'm here on behalf of our membership base and also a group that is called the Big Game Conservation Association, which I'm a founding member and executive board member currently. We appreciate Senator Erdman's desire to bring prosperity to his district and his region. We certainly agree, and this has nothing to do with Sidney, Nebraska by any means, by our membership base or our partners. I happen to have enjoyed Sidney on many occasions over the last 15 to 20 years for personal and business, and it is a great city. In addition, one of our executive board members is a former VP and president of Bass Pro and Cabela's and was stationed in Sidney, is now living here in Lincoln and would wish to move back to Sidney. With that said, our concerns regarding 397, or as already been stated by Director McCoy, the buildings are owned here in Lincoln. Does it matter to sportsmen whether they're in Sidney or in Lincoln from a standpoint of our everyday functions with our passions? No, it does not. But from a simple standpoint of removing an agency from the centralized government location where they have commingling and networking with all the other agencies and NGOs, quite frankly, on a frequent basis for educational purposes, for growth purposes, and for changes, to remove them from the central location, in our opinion, would hinder their ability to continue to grow and do their job. There's already questions in certain regions of the state as to whether the Game and Parks is doing their job or not. We're going to add to that. In addition, our concern mostly is around the PR and DR funds, or Pittman Robinson and Dingo Johnson funds, that they may have to repay to the Fish and Wildlife Services for vacating that building if they're relocated. It's a sizable chunk of money that outweighs any of the benefits that you're talking about renting this space out to other institutions in the state. That's our main concerns. I will tell you, I agree with Senator Erdman. I am a Lincoln resident. It does smell like taxes, and it has for 30 years. But that is my choice to live here. If I would move out of the city, I would certainly do it. Same regard, I would disagree with Senator Erdman that the bulk of natural resource issues are in his district in western and central Nebraska. There is a fair number of them, but we have a large state with very diverse districts and very diverse regional zones. We have our issues here in the eastern side of the state. We have our issues in central Nebraska. Senator Kavanaugh may recall the issue of the IED and the deer interactions with collisions that took place for years. And I don't remember what that fence cost, but along the Platte River and Bridge, but we have those issues. We also have depredation issues. We also have disease issues that occur on this side of the state in central Nebraska. So it is a statewide issue, and the wildlife is statewide. And we would like to maintain a relationship with the game and parks in the city council, or in the centralized business and government, as opposed to removing them. My question is, most of the ag is done west of 81 in the state. Are we moving them to Kearney? I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. So we appreciate it. We opportunity. We wish you'd keep the bill in this committee. And if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from committee members? Is there a motion?
Where's your organization headquartered?
Here.
You don't want to move to Sidney.
I would love to move to Sidney. The problem is that I have 4 grandchildren, and I know my wife is not leaving 4 grandchildren on this side of the state.
Just teasing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you for your testimony. Next opponent, LB 397, please.
Good morning, members of the Natural Resources Committee. Senator Bostelman. My name is Al Davis, ALDAVIS. I am the registered lobbyist for the 3,000 members of the Nebraska chapter of Sierra Club. So the advantage to coming last is you follow everybody else who's already said everything that needs to be said. So I'm a Western Nebraska resident, as you know, and I appreciate Senator Erdman's efforts to try to diversify and help the economy in rural parts of the state. We do need to do that. I completely agree with that. There's too much funding placed into these metropolitan areas, not enough for rural Nebraska. If we want to stop the brain drain from rural Nebraska and depopulation, we're going to have to invest out there. But I don't think this is the appropriate solution to that, and neither do the members of the Sierra Club. The primary issue that we see is the turnover of probably highly skilled people who are knowledgeable, who may be at the tail end of their career and have a wife with a good job here in Lincoln or a husband with a good job, commitments to their church, commitment to their social clubs, commitment to other things, and aren't going to want to move. And so I see a significant number of people retiring, and then you've got to fill a number of jobs that are somewhat specialized in rural Nebraska in Sidney. I'd like to think that was an easy thing to do, but looking around the United States, it looks like there just are millions of jobs out there. So filling those jobs is going to be hard. And I think that's going to be damaging to the agency. And of course, the costs associated with it, I don't think we really have a good grasp of those. And Mr. McCoy laid that out pretty well, but there are many, many times when the members of the Game and Parks staff need to be here in Lincoln to meet with other agencies. So you're going to have these, 700-mile trips, and that's going to be costly and time consuming and a waste of their resources. So with that, I will close and take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from committee members? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next opponent, LB 397, please step forward. Any other opponents to LB 397? Seeing none, anyone testify in the neutral capacity, please step forward. Morning.
Good morning. Members of the Natural Resource Committee, thank you for your due diligence and time and sincere appreciation for holding public office and molding space within the daily sphere of news. I'm handing out a handout here. I've recently attended a meeting.
State your name and spell your name, please.
Michael, Michael, Ryan, Ryan. I recently attended a budget meeting for the Nebraska Game and Parks, and I'd like to provide expert testimony as to what I saw and heard and a path forward which I see as possible. When I walked into this meeting, it was at Mahoney State Park. I heard the deputy director, Jim Swenson. He's the gentleman below Director Tim McCoy. He said, we need a ramrod to come in and fix all our problems at the Nebraska Game and Parks. We need a ramrod to come in and fix all our problems at the Nebraska Game and Parks. With that in mind, I sat down to this meeting and I listened to everything that they were there to discuss. I included that right here. I think LB 397 has the possibility to do great things. You need to, if you, other states have split game and parks and fish and wildlife. Wyoming has Wyoming State Parks and Historical Site, and they have Wyoming Game and Fish Department. North Dakota has North Dakota Parks and Recreation, and they have North Dakota Game and Fish. I'm proposing that you guys consider creating Nebraska Game and Fish and Nebraska Parks and State Historical, 2 separate entities. The Game and Fish go out to Sidney, and they do great things. And the rest of the people stay here in Lincoln until you figure out what talents should stay and which talents should be moved on. There's outdoor interactions, how we interact with the environment. There's learning environments. And Nebraska Game and Parks is the front door to how Nebraskans, how youth, how adults interact with nature. And from what I've seen, we're not teaching people how to respect and utilize the natural resources that we have. During this time of what should I say, researching Nebraska Game and Parks, I went and spoke to 10 park superintendents and asked them what are their feelings towards Nebraska Game and Parks, how could they be improved? And I was told by 2 people that Nebraska Game and Parks sees us as plow jockeys. Our job around here at these state parks is to mow the grass and pick up stuff that falls down. On one certain day, there was a beautiful cottonwood tree that had blown over a windstorm. And the cottonwood tree could have been used for an interactive exhibit. It could have been used for a tree house. It could have been used for something other than just chopping it down and turning it into mulch. Like Game and Parks has fundamental flaws. If I were to summarize everything that I saw there at the Game and Parks meeting, I would say that the main flaws are trying to sell too many permits. They're selling. Their goal is to sell, and it should be about experiences. Nebraska Game and Parks, Nebraska wildlife and fish should be giving experiences. And the current structure of the Nebraska parks should be managing, doing what they're currently doing. IT, when I listened to the IT presentation at this meeting, they basically have a stranglehold on Nebraska Game and Parks because they're the only ones who can monitor the paying of permits online. There was a gentleman who stood up at the beginning during introductions, and he said, "My name is so-and-so. I'm the dream killer. I'm known in this department as the dream killer. Dream, D-R-E-A-M, killer. You guys bring good ideas to me, and my job is to shoot them down." I think the Nebraska Game and Parks should be split. I spoke with John Ross yesterday. He was the Hunter Education Master Instructor for Nebraska Game and Parks, and I asked him, "What is your solution to fixing this? If Game and Parks goes to Sidney?" He says, "We need to split it to the way it was in the 1920s and 30s before the Parks Department got involved. It should be Nebraska Game and Fish and then the parks." One final thing before I run out of time. I spoke to employees at the Calumet State Fish Hatchery in Burwell. I asked them why there is not more fish being put into the general public. And they said, because we have to buy minnows from out of state and they cost 3 to 4 times what it would cost for us to grow them ourselves here at the hatchery. I, again, think we should look at it from Nebraska Game and Fish, Nebraska Experiences and Fish, and then Nebraska Parks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Any other neutral testifiers today? Anyone else like to testify in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, Senator Erdman, you're welcome to close.
Thank you, Senator Bostelman. I appreciate the neutral testimony. That was interesting. He may have some good ideas. So let me address a couple of things about the property there in Sidney. The last time that I tried this, I was contacted by some folks in Sidney that said they were willing to purchase those facilities and rent them to the state. So I think there's opportunities in Sidney beyond us purchasing land there or buildings. So, you know, that facility is a great facility. And you heard this morning, Senator or Director McCoy said they have about 180 people in Lincoln. Not all would move. The question was asked, you know, where you live. And so let me give you this little bit of perspective. I am closer, where I live, I am closer to 3 state capitals than this one. And so it is a ways out there. And I appreciate all those people who drove in from Sidney. I would assume that you understand as well as I do, you had like 62 letters in support. And I think you had, 4 or 5 in opposition. You don't see a lot of people here today to testify against moving game and parks to Sidney that live in Lincoln. You hear those people who are part of game and parks or work with game and parks. And it is peculiar in this regard. The committee that I serve on, currently appropriations, I have never seen an agency that has a bill that affects them ever testify in opposition. Every agency that comes to our committee that is speaking about a bill, they're neutral. They come in a neutral capacity. But that's not the case with Game and Parks. They continuously speak in opposition to most bills that people introduce. Senator Brewer had a bill yesterday or the day before that they came in and testified against in that bill. And so maybe they didn't get the memo from somebody that agencies aren't supposed to testify in opposition. And so they do a thorough job, and we give him plenty of time to make his case. And so, you know, we hear all those reasons why we can't move it, and all of those things. People are going to relocate, and they're getting close to the end of their career, and they have to make a decision. And they work with BIS and OCIO, and we have to be in Lincoln, and all those excuses. And we never hear any solutions out of Game and Parks. And so, I'll give you a case in point. In 2005, they did an analysis of how many elk they had in the Pine Ridge, and it came back that the elk population in Pine Ridge should be 600, no more than 600. That's 2005. Here we are in 2023. They're still trying to figure out how many elk they have in Pine Ridge. They already had a survey done, and they understood how many animals there should be, but they never do anything about it. And so I'm not sure why they think that they need to be in Lincoln to do all those things that they described when you have the internet, and most of those people that can contact with the federal or the state agencies live here. Okay. And so most of the antelope, elk, mountain lions, and those things that we have a problem with are in the western part of the state, and it'd be an opportunity for them to be close to those. And I know that because they've shared all that about what it's going to cost them if they move, they got to pay for the building, and you'll hear all that. And yesterday we toured the 5th floor of the Capitol to make that into a museum. And that's going to cost $3.4 million to refurbish about 3,000 square feet. So when it comes to state government, money doesn't seem to be an issue if you want to do it. So don't let them try to scare you that they don't have the money to do it, or they won't be able to do it because it costs so much, or someone won't want to move to Sidney and they won't be able to find qualified people. Well, I can tell you this, in my opinion, some of these qualified, trained, and specialists aren't doing their job, or we'd have less elk and less damage than we currently have. And so I'm not saying that those people are necessarily not doing their job right, but it's not very conducive to controlling the population the way they do it now. So maybe somebody else could do a better job. So I'm not at all interested in hearing them whine about somebody's got to move to Lincoln. When those people lost their jobs from Cabela's, some of those people changed their career and stayed there and did things in Sidney to stay there. And so we'll find people to work in Sidney that are just as qualified as the ones we have here, and maybe do a better job. And so don't let them people scare you that this can't be done. It can be done, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen today. Thank you.
Other questions from committee members? We did receive 62 proponent, 62 proponent and 5 opponent letters for this. So with that, seeing no questions, I'll close our hearing on LB 397. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Okay, now we'll open the hearing on LB 425. Senator Bostelman, you were recognized.
Good morning, Vice Chairman Mosier and members of the Natural Resource Committee. My name is Bruce Bostelman, spelled Brucebostelman, and I represent Legislative District 23. I'm here today to introduce LB 425, which updates several sections of Chapter 37. The first being to increase a quorum for the Game and Parks Commission from 4 members to 5 members, as they have a 5-member body. LB 425 also increases the non-resident fees for several permits. These increases are listed in your committee summary. The bill also clarifies that an individual receives an auction, if an individual receives an auction permit for a mountain sheep, it does not count against the individual's lifetime total of 1 mountain sheep. Next, the Game and Parks has provided the discretion on permitting non-resident hunters during depredation seasons. During last year's depredation season, the Game and Parks received a lot of feedback from landowners in western Nebraska about issues involving non-resident hunters. By giving discretion to non-resident permit allocations, they'll be able to address the concerns of landowners regarding non-resident hunters while maintaining non-resident landowner permits. LB 425 also increases the maximum area allowed to be licensed as a game breeding and controlled shooting area from 2% to 5% of the county's total acreage. Finally, the bill would allow Game and Parks to issue permits to harvest elk in areas of the state designated as game refuges when the number of elk has been determined to be detrimental to the habitat of the refuge or to adjacent privately owned real or personal property. I urge the community to vote this bill to general file, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Senator Bostelman from the committee? Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Vice Chair Moser. Thank you, Senator Bostelman, for bringing this bill. I would assume you worked with the Game and Parks Agency to arrive at all these numbers?
They're their numbers, yes.
Okay. So just going through the bill, it appears that we increased the quorum because the size of the board is increasing.
No, the board's always been 9, but so it's correct. Well, it's been a long-standing thing to 5. So
okay, well that looks like it should have been corrected a long time ago.
Sure.
And then it looks like all of the non-resident permits went up, which I'm in agreement with, and it doesn't look like any of the resident permits
Correct.
went up. Is that how you read this?
correct, and I believe if the director testifies that he'll have a handout for that showing what that is exactly.
All
It's
right.
only non-resident permits.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Yes,
I just-
Senator Hughes.
This is just, sorry, thank you, Senator Moser. This is just a question for me understanding. So if I want to go shoot a mountain sheep,
Mhm.
Is it only by auction I can get it, right? Or,
No, there's 2 ways to obtain a mountain sheep, bighorn sheep. Is what
Yes.
you hear. So it's mountain sheep in statute. So
okay,
there's 2 ways to do. One is there's a lottery that you can apply for through the
Right.
state. And the other is there is an auction item, and those are determined by the state Game and Parks as to whether they're even going to have those
I hear
permits.
or not,
But
right?
you can apply for a draw, or you can go to an event and
And
an auction and buy a ticket, buy a permit. So
And
this
you're-
does not allow, what this says is that if you're one of those who goes to an auction and buys a mountain sheep permit,
Yeah.
you can still apply online for the drawing.
So you technically could get 2.
Sorry?
If you did it that way, you could maybe get 2 of them in your life.
Potentially over time. Right.
I know
That's one
they're
if you could
hard.
draw it, yeah.
It's just interesting. Okay.
So what it does, I think, the intent of this is not to disincentivize someone to go and buy, because those permits are fairly expensive.
Yes.
In 6 digits a lot of times. So they don't want to, you don't want to disincentivize those auction permits and that opportunity a person may have by then also allowing them not to have a drawing.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Senator. Anybody else here to speak in support of this bill? Welcome.
Good morning. My name's Timothy McCoy. I'm the director of the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, TIMOTHYMCCOY, located in our office at 2200 North 33rd Street, Lincoln. I'd like to thank Senator Bostelman for bringing this bill. As Senator Brandt alluded to, several of the sections in this bill, there's really 2 things. We're trying to increase our non-resident fee caps. And then we are also have some other cleanup that were agency things that we've been wanting to make sure we corrected in statute or updated in statute. Those changes in those caps, we looked at sort of an across the board 30% increase in those statutory caps. That change in caps does not create an automatic fee increase. We still have to go through our full promulgation of agency regs and approval by the governor, which also includes obviously public notice and a public hearing for a commission business meeting with any of those fee changes made and approved by a vote of the commission members under the Administrative Procedures Act. Also in our statutes 37327, there are limits to fee increases the commission can make. A permit fee cannot be increased more than 6% a year. That can be carried for up to 3 years. So the maximum increase, if we have an increased fees for 3 years, would be 18%, which is pretty high. And it's capped at that, even if you waited 5 years to increase the fee. These non-resident fees for these permits were last increased by the commission in 2021, and almost all of them are either at or nearly at the caps that are in statute. And the non-resident caps themselves, what we're asking to do was last done by the legislature in 2016. Part of the reasoning for this, we look at what we see in the increases in non-resident fees from surrounding states, and we've also heard from our resident sportsmen that hunt in other states that many of our permits are, in their words, too cheap compared to what they pay when they go travel to another state to hunt for different species. And our commission, our board has been very responsible, and over the years with fee increases, wanting to make sure that when we're doing these, that there's we know there's a clear need and a clear purpose, and this allows us some flexibility to increase those over several years, but using that restraint, looking to make sure we maintain our non-resident hunters and fishers. Just a point of interest, we've not increased resident hunting and fishing permits fees since 2017. We've not increased the resident fur harvest permits since 2002. And we've been maintaining $5 youth permits for deer, turkey, and antelope for both non-resident and resident youth at $5 since they were established in 2010. We see that that's a great opportunity to help recruit hunters, both young hunters in Nebraska and youth that are coming with a parent to come hunt Nebraska. The commissioner quorum correction from 4 to 5, I'm thinking it was 2009 or 2010, there was a change and added another at-large commission district. So before that we had 8. My assumption is when they did that, they did not update that quorum. We've never had a meeting where anything like that happened, but having a potential statutory quorum without a majority is a problem. Section 4, Bruce covered this very well, that the commission can try to be able to put those limitations in a special depredation season order to be able to provide some limits on non-residents. We heard from sportsmen, Nebraska resident sportsmen that were upset about that, as well as from landowners when we had a special depredation season for elk. The exception for the auction mountain lion sheep permit from the once in a lifetime limit, that actually mimics exactly what we already do with bull elk permits that are utilized under auction tags. It's also consistent with how other states around the country that do have auction permits for mountain lions are set up. That also has raised some confusion among potential bidders in recent years. Section 7 allows for the group hunt application, referred to as a buddy permit, to include up to 6 applicants. That current maximum is 2. We can raise this because we have a new permit system that's able to handle it. Those are groups of people that want to go on a deer hunt together. And so they all apply at the same time. They can build points, and then when they draw, they all draw as one group so that they can go together. And then the increase in the controlled shooting area acreages, when we look at surrounding states, Nebraska was at 2% of the county. The only other 2 states around us that have restrictions are Iowa at 3%, Kansas at 5%. The other surrounding states have no limits. This provides some additional commercial activity available in parts of the state. We have a few counties that are either at or close to that cap. Those are areas where, you know, the commercial CSAs release birds. They usually have dogs. If the hunter doesn't have dogs, they can have a good hunting experience. Several of those also partner with us in helping with recruiting youth to pheasant hunting. And then Section 10, the last piece, will simply add elk as a species that can be hunted in the Gardner County Refuge. Deer can already be hunted there. Part of that reason is we've had some elk move into that Gardner County Refuge area, and we believe that this would allow opportunity for hunters to go shoot those.
All right. Are there questions for the director? I have one. Yeah. Well, maybe more than one. But how many sheep permits do you give?
Typically, we've done 1 or 2. If we do 1, it's a lottery in a year. If we only do 1, it would be a lottery tag. That's just a lottery for residents. If we do 2, we are able to have 1 of those be an auction tag. That then is available to residents and non-residents, but it's an auction, so the prices get high. I think the most recent one we had was above $200,000 that people that are dedicated sheep hunters are really.
Was it an out-of-state person?
It was.
And who gets the $200,000?
The way our auction tags work, we award those to other entities that auction them off. They can keep up to a maximum of, I believe under our regulations, 20% of the take. The other 80% comes to us. However, when we evaluate organizations that want to do these, we ask them what percentage they are going to keep. And in many cases, they will maybe keep 10%, and then the rest of the money comes directly to us. And many of those organizations also support our sheep program. So they have donated money at different times to different projects when we're working with bighorn sheep.
So if you have more than one agency more than one organization that wants to auction off your sheep permit, you give them all a fair shake to see
we
whether
do.
or not.
We have a formal evaluation process where they provide information on their application, and then we review that based on some scoring metrics to just make sure that we do that. The other thing that we do is, and part of those metrics are, you know, have they had a sheep permit auction recently? You know, compared to the others, try to provide an equal opportunity there. Yep.
Do you do something special with that money, or does it just go into the general fund?
Well, it goes into the game fund, and we always look at that relative to continuing our work with bighorn sheep and other big game, similar to the elk auction tags and deer auction tags are the same way.
You have deer auction tags?
Yeah, we have some deer auction tags.
Okay. Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Vice Chair Moser. Thank you, Director McCoy, for testifying on this. First, to clarify on the auction issue, reading this on page 9, the new language says, except that an auction permit issued in accordance with subsection 3 of this section to harvest a mountain sheep shall not count against such total. I read that the same person could come back and be the winning bidder year after year after year on the auction. Is that how it's intended?
That somebody could potentially do that. Somebody could potentially have a permit or win it, purchase it at an auction somewhere with one of the groups that auctions these, and they may want to come back. We've never had that happen.
Shouldn't we have, if the intent is to exclude, shouldn't you have language in there that once you win the auction once, you're done except for the lottery?
That's the challenge. If there's no other state in the country that has sheep auction tag. When they do auction tags, they don't create a once in a lifetime get the permit or harvest limit. And that's where we've ran into a lot of confusion that's happened with bidders.
But it seems to me that just the well-off, and probably so. I mean, if you're selling something for 200,000, but I imagine that even among that high stratosphere, somebody was the second bidder at 195,000. That this will continue to escalate. That you could probably successfully ban the winning bidder and still have a lineup of other people willing to bid that. Not.
Maybe, but the other thing that's interesting at auctions is some of these auctions take phone auctions. So somebody provides them a bid and they're not exactly sure who it's for until they get the winning bid. And so we ran into these conflicts. We've had the sheep groups that have auction tags that have asked us to do this because it's creating some real problems and confusion because it's so different than what we do in any other state. It's also different than our auction elk tag that we already do. We accept that from the once in a lifetime harvest.
And it seems strange. I mean, you've got a golden ticket here. Why give these groups any amount of money? Why give them 20%? It's the state wildlife we're auctioning off. Why doesn't Game and Parks keep 100% of the proceeds, particularly when you're looking at a permit that's 200,000 and I don't know what is your elk permit auction?
Oh, our elk permits don't typically go near that high. And they're talking, maybe 50,000.
All right. Okay.
However, there are some real challenges for us as a state agency to hold the auction.
Meaning?
Meaning all the state rules and requirements that go with it. We do this utilizing an agreement with them where they run the auction.
You need somebody else to run the auction to make
and most of these groups, the reason that they're able to raise this sort of money, they do these at large national or large regional places where they're auctioning off multiple tags for multiple states. And so they're drawing that really wealthy clientele that is willing to pay that sort of money.
Absolutely. They want to bag one of everything in every state.
And from our perspective, that probably results in more income than if we were trying to run it here, from our headquarters.
So with all these changes, and I see no objection to this, how many more dollars will this bring into the agency?
Well, if you look at our fiscal note, we have some estimates. In a full year, it would likely be about 1.6 million. If you look at just what we would expect in the first year, and I'm gonna condition this after I'm done. We look at it at the first year, it would potentially be about 389,000. Part of that's tied to when we have to do our fee increases. Unless this is passed with an emergency provision, which we never want to assume that. We think spring turkey would be about the only thing that we could increase in this first fiscal year. And then the second fiscal year, we would see the full effect of that because other than spring turkey, most of those seasons.
And then that just goes into your general operating fund.
That would go into the game cash fund, all of our permit sales. So that can be used for all of the wildlife conservation work we do, law enforcement, all the other activities that we do on the game side.
Okay, and I guess finally, in my area of southeast Nebraska, we get a tremendous amount of out-of-state hunters. They lease our creeks, and it has replaced where the pheasant hunters used to be. We now have deer hunters. And I look at these graphs that are on this handout that you had. Even with the increases, we are not number one on any of these categories. Can we be like the most expensive deer permit for out-of-state residents or out-of-state turkey? These guys are spending thousands and thousands of dollars, and they've got their deer camps, and I mean the permit, if it was $200 or $500 for most of these guys, wouldn't make them a nickel's worth of difference, or keep them from coming from Louisiana or wherever they're coming from. Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, part of my opinion might sound like it's personal. I'm a Nebraska guy. But we do try to make sure that our fees are kind of in line with the bulk of our surrounding states. You kind of try to, some of these states have developed really premium costs. Some of them have done it in a really interesting way when you look at their cost to hunt, where Iowa and Kansas require their non-residents to buy a small game permit in addition to their deer permit. We've never gone down that road. It just seems more complicated. So we just try to do the fee straight up. But yeah, there's the potential, these caps, if this group felt like you wanted to, there was a desire from the committee to increase those farther. Obviously we can work our way up to those caps over multiple years. So it's not something we would do just rapidly.
All right, thank you.
So is your organization cash? I mean, you operate on fees and
we have
fines
88% of the funds that in typical years. Last year with some of the additional Star Wars money, it really kind of threw our budget around. But in a typical year, if you look at mainly on our operating budget, we're spending 88% of the appropriations that we're awarded is paying for is coming out of our cash funds, about 12% general funds. That 88%, I guess, isn't all cash funds because that also includes the federal funds that we get, the wildlife and sportfish restoration are about 8% of that budget.
Do you limit the number of people from out of state that can hunt deer or?
We do in areas turkeys, where we have that need to limit the permits with the draw, where we've had so much demand from residents and non-residents that they're selling out so fast our residents don't get a fair shake. In most cases we've limited those to about 15% of the total permits that non-residents can have. We're also limiting spring turkey permits coming this spring for non-residents to 10,000. We sold almost 17,000 2 years ago and 14,000 last year, and part of that is tied to concerns from our hunters and actually the other concern about our turkey population's been declining.
What percentage of the turkey permits were filled last year? Do you have that?
I don't have that. No, I don't have that number in front of me, but it was lower last spring. Turkey movement was not very good, and also the incessant wind that blew last spring made turkey hunting really hard from my experience.
I got turkeys walking down the middle of the road right past my house. You could sit on my front porch and bag a turkey, except to make the neighbors mad. They'd all call the cops. Any other questions for testifier? Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else to speak in support?
Sound like an invite to me.
Greetings, welcome.
Greetings, Scott Smathers, SCOTT, SMATHERS, Director of the Nebraska Sportsman Foundation. We want to be officially on the record, as Senator promoted him. Director McCoy stated that we've had a lot of conversations regarding non-resident tags. It is a frequent conversation within our groups when we travel. When we're not here, when you're in session, my job is to travel the state and work with all the sportsmen's groups. One-on-one, that's anywhere from 5 people at a meeting to 500. And the number one conversation is those pesky non-residents and what they pay. And you're right, Senator Brandt, most of us that are avid sportsmen and hunters, we do travel to other neighboring states. And so the entire package of the bill, we're glad Senator Bostelman carried it for Director McCoy. We agree with everything, elk in particular, because it's another tool to put in the bag that we have a growing elk issue with population size. One of the things you don't see on here is an elk for non-resident, which Nebraska has quickly grown in the last 4 years to one of the best locations in the country to hunt for a 400 sport class better elk. And they're not leaving anytime soon because we have the habitat. The sheep permit is not an issue for most of our members and hunters in the state. It's an out of reach price tag for us. But the non-residents, we're always looking to increase our economic input in the state and our power for the state to bring money to the state. We have some of the best. And Senator Brent, you brought up a point of we're not number one in all those non-resident fees. Some of that's driven by, if you compare Iowa deer and Kansas deer to Nebraska, most sportsmen will tell you Iowa and Kansas have a better quality of deer. Therefore, they charge more for out-of-staters, and it's a coveted permit. However, when you do look at wanting to be competitive with the neighboring states, because it's an easy drive, and I looked at Iowa, Kansas, South Dakota, Nebraska, or Missouri, and looked at our neighboring states. Easy drives for most of us, no matter where you're going in the state. And we're still in that number 3 to 4 range of the cost of permit versus our neighbors. Are we missing an opportunity by not charging more? I would argue we're not, because our quality is not necessarily the same as some of our neighboring states. Missouri is always going to be cheaper than most of us in most cases because they have a dedicated funding source that's state-driven. That was decided 100 years ago, if you will. The other thing we want to talk about is that we're happy with the fees with the CSA. We had a hearing here yesterday, I think you may recall, regarding pheasants. The decline in numbers. CSAs are one of the areas that we're able to help get more people involved. And it's a growing issue that we need to have an opportunity. I have a lot of money invested in my dog. I need to work that dog without doing a 5-hour trip. So I do visit Oak Creek and Brainerd. I do visit Tacoma. And I also visit Syracuse for BD Outdoors quite a bit. Increasing that landmass availability in each county is going to allow them to continue to grow. It's going to allow additional business to come into those communities and bring additional revenues. My annual membership for BD's alone is $2,000 a year, I believe. But I shoot unlimited birds and I work my dog through the CSA season. So it keeps him sharp. So with that said, we are strongly in approval of 425 and ask for it to be advanced to the floor so we can continue to grow the state of Nebraska and sportsmen's input. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Questions for the testifier, Senator Hughes?
Thank you, Senator Moser. Thanks for coming. Just curious, what makes Iowa deer better?
You now enter into the world of sportsmen bragging and in coffee shops and who's and why. Everybody's got an opinion. There's different reasons for different things, but from a standpoint of habitat, there's more lush vegetation. Eastern Nebraska is a very, very quality whitetail deer. I chase both whitetail and mule, and so I have a place in western Nebraska and a place here that I hunt. Iowa has, in my opinion, a richer river system, which creates a lusher background, so the deer grow a little bigger. Plus,
so they're just bigger.
Yeah, I mean, it's just genetics. And again, it's all subject to, I personally feed supplements on food plots on my land that I own. I have very large deer.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator Brandt?
Thank you, Vice Chair Moser. Real quick question.
Yes,
Is Iowa still a shotgun-only state on deer?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
You'd be a lot closer to shoot a deer with a shotgun.
Yeah, well, yes, you do. But I am also, there's a large number of us that don't shoot anything out of 150 yards mostly. So we're still relatively close shooters.
They probably don't use birdshot when they're shooting them.
I wouldn't want to stand in front of it, no.
Okay, other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anybody else to speak in support? Is anyone here to speak against this bill?
We're going to try a little experiment here. My name is Michael Ryan, Michael-Ryan. This may or may not work. I will not waste your time, I promise.
I don't know what you're thinking of, but we don't use props. We
You can't do visuals?
No, you can't project anything on the wall, so.
Can I ask you
can
questions personally?
testify.
Okay.
The committee does not answer questions, no.
Okay.
You
Well,
can
I'm just gonna
testify
describe
about
a
the bill,
situation.
whether you like it or whether you don't, or, why you like it or why you don't.
Understand. Thank you. This is my third time up here, so I'm learning the process. So if
Sure.
I have voice cracks, I apologize. I'm learning to
Just
be a better
relax,
speaker.
slow down a little bit, tell us what you think.
I do not think the commission should have 5 people. I think Nebraska Game and Parks should be split. This bill would add 1 more person to that. I have spoken to 2 commissioners in the past who sit on the board. You just go in the wrong direction. I am a product of Nebraska Game and Parks. I was the 7-year-old kid who went out there and went pheasant hunting, who went through the Pheasants Forever programs. I checked in deers before. I've seen how this organization works. There needs to be more of an emphasis on sportsmanship, conservation, and not just making money. My current problem that I am having with where I'm located is the conservation agencies do not care about a wildlife habitat. The video I was going to show you is of a batch of trees that I have visited for the last 5 years and photographed wildlife at. When I was driving down here on Wednesday, it was up in flames. And I sent a letter to the director and I said, why are we doing this? This is a known habitat for river otters, for eagles, for deer, for all sorts of things. Why are we burning this?
Let me ask you a question.
National Audubon.
This is a state-owned area that was in flames?
National Audubon, they own the land right next to the river.
So that's a conservation group?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And I've spoken with our
I'm gonna
conservation.
clarify your question.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
They're burning this. And I sent an email to the director and said, why are we burning this? And they said it is our land management plan. Our land management plan is to get rid of dead lumber. What I have seen from watching these conservation organizations, they do not work with the Nebraska Game and Parks. Conservation organizations are on one side of the table. Game and Parks is on the other side. Game and Parks cares about killing animals and getting paid to kill animals in a sense, to make it legal to shoot an animal. Conservation organizations don't really care about the animals. They're just trying to milk cattle funds, funding from their cattle on their lands. I have no. Maybe you can tell me, who can I go to hold conservation groups accountable? These trees should not have been burnt down. I have kayaked to these trees 1 mile. I have run down there. I have forged the river of the Platte to go up and take pictures of these trees where wildlife sits. I have freelanced for National Geographic in the past. I have freelanced for the New York Times. I have done numerous things that allow me the opportunity to see the bigger picture. These trees should not have been destroyed. By adding a 5th person to the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, it's just going to continue to create more of the same. There needs to be accountability. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? All right, thank you. Anybody else to speak in opposition? Is anyone here to speak in the neutral? Okay, what did we have for letters? Okay, we have 2 proponents and no opponents. Senator Bostelman waives his closing, so that will conclude our hearing for LB 425. Thank you for attending.